This is a Fox 13 News special report.
Every year there are studies after study after study that relate air pollution to new forms of disease.
Utah's issues with air quality are no secret.
Basically what happens is cold air settles in our valley and then warm air slides over the top of that, and that acts like a lid.
We all have to breathe the air around us, and making it better means understanding it. That means moving past the typical message.
Comes from our tailpipes.
We cannot just keep asking people to do the same things that they're already trying to do and maybe saying do a little more of it when we've got industrial polluters that are given permits to expand.
For the next half hour, we are breaking down the ingredients of pollution and their sources, from mining and refining operations.
Where our refinery is located, there's been a refining operation there since 1908.
To a drying lake, giving up toxic dust.
I've personally observed dust coming off the lake in every month except for December and January.
And we'll explain how the house you can afford impacts the air you breathe.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us for a Fox 13 News special presentation. I'm Bob Evans.
And I'm Kelly Chapman. Fox 13's Max Roth has been reporting on Utah's air quality for many, many years now and joins us in studio tonight.
And recently, he spoke with researchers and industry leaders to learn more about pollution and what they and we can do about it. Max.
Yeah, thanks, Bob and Kelly. You know, we are looking at the things we hear every year. Then we're diving into the best information available and asking smart people to help us see the big picture. We're talking about what you breathe and what your children breathe. It's important. So we'll begin with the soundbite we hear most often, the one about your car's tailpipe.
You don't have stuff coming out the tailpipe.
Comes from our tailpipes.
Out of the tailpipe.
50% of all the emissions come from tailpipes.
But not all tailpipes are created equal.
1 1/4 inch stainless steel tube there.
Utah State University's Randy Martin knows his tailpipes. He and his students track what comes out of them.
Here we have the NOx concentration.
There's a lot we don't understand.
The ammonium nitrate accounts for roughly about 50% of the particle mass.
In Cache County, where Martin lives, ammonium comes from cows and other agriculture, but the metro counties of the Wasatch Front, Weber, Davis, Salt Lake, and Utah, don't have so many cows. So where does the Wasatch Front get all its ammonium nitrate?
And so we have to understand how that ammonium nitrate is formed.
One possible source?
We've been driving down the road with an ammonia sensor, and when we go by a big diesel truck, we'll see the ammonia spike. So we know it's coming from there. Now we just need to quantify how much that is.
Back to diesels in a moment, but first, let's look at a recipe for smog stew. For this stew, we'll only use ingredients from
tailpipes.
After all, tailpipes do contribute
50% of all the emissions.
Our ingredients will fill a 10-cup bowl of pollution. 2 cups come from just a few clunkers and illegally modified cars and trucks.
Even studies that we've done in the past have shown that between 5 and 10% of the vehicles are responsible for as much as 25 to 50% of the emissions.
The rest of our personal gasoline-powered cars and trucks, about 1.5 million vehicles on the Wasatch Front, contribute 3.5 cups to the recipe. The other 4.5 cups, 45% of tailpipe emissions, come from about 115,000 diesels, along with some non-road trains, planes, construction, and farm equipment.
There's a trade-off often because they contribute more individually to the economy.
We do need the big machines, but aren't we also inviting a whole lot more by creating a giant inland port on Salt Lake City's west side?
Yeah, the inland port is a concern.
We took the concern to the top.
My name is Jack Hedge, Hedge, and I'm the executive director of the Utah Inland Port Authority.
Hedge says the train tracks and freeways already come through the Wasatch Front. We're stuck with them. A port authority exists to guide how they work.
For example, Amazon just bought 100,000 electric delivery vehicles to deliver packages for all of us. If we want those electric delivery vehicles deployed here, there has to be the infrastructure to support them.
How do our viewers know that you're going to do that, that this port is not going to have a net negative effect on the air we breathe?
The proof, I guess, will be in the pudding. We're certainly not asking anyone to trust us. The proof is in the pudding. But look at our business plan as that rolls out, and look at the measures that we identify as being the ways to measure what we're doing and how we're doing.
Do you have the power to turn down companies that do not comply with these kinds of things?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that'll be one of the criteria. That's how we'll use our financing.
Jack Hedge there invited us to follow up, and we will take him up on that. And now I want to dive into my reporter notebook for things that didn't make the story. First, there are these things called VMTs, Vehicle Miles Traveled. I call them varmints to remember. Anyway, there are 2 million vehicles on the Wasatch Front. All of us together drive 53.5 million miles a day. That is a trip to Mars. It's crazy. Some things we can do. A small action, you could take the bus, or maybe choose to have Amazon deliver everything on the same day every week instead of every other day. A big action, when you choose your next home, choose to live closer to work, or maybe buy an electric car. And a thing that we can do as a community is tell our lawmakers we need the port to be clean, because you can bet the companies that move into the port will have lobbyists talking to your lawmaker. Well, coming up, dust in the wind. We're not talking about the song, but actual particulates in the air, which used to be at the bottom of the Great Salt Lake. And we hear from some of the biggest industries on the Wasatch Front, Rio Tinto and the biggest oil refinery, about the impact industry has on our air. Stay with us. Glad you're with us for this Fox 13 Investigates special report on Utah's polluters. We just talked about a stew of smog just from our tailpipes. Now we're going to expand the recipe, because we always hear big industrial polluters aren't that big a part of our problem. For some perspective, let's go back to our cookbook for a more complex recipe.
We'll start with a recipe for Wasatch Front smog stew. It includes all our sources of pollution. Our recipe makes 10 cups. Start with 5.5 cups of tailpipe exhaust. That's 2.5 cups of diesels and clunkers, just under a cup from trains, planes, tractors, and cranes, and just over 2 cups from the rest of our cars. Bring that to a simmer, and then add 3.2 cups of emission from our houses, churches, businesses, all the important little places in our lives. Then we have the ingredients that make Wasatch Front smog stew truly distinctive. 1.3 cups from big industrial polluters. Of course, you've been told those ingredients don't amount to much.
Only about 13 to 15% of our problems come from our refineries.
Some people have a misperception of the air quality. For instance, they think it all comes from refineries.
But you could look at it this way. Big sites called point sources contribute more pollutants than every single car, truck, train, crane, house, business, and other source in Weber County or Davis County. And another perspective, the big 3 pollutants creating particulates in the winter are nitrogen oxide, called NOx, volatile organic compounds, VOCs, and sulfur dioxide, SO2. Just Rio Tinto Kennecott and Utah's 5 oil refineries have contributed more than 75% of the SO2 on the Wasatch Front. You may have noticed the careful wording there. They have contributed. Our data is from 2017, and they say when new data from 2019 is released, we'll see improvement.
We've invested, significant amounts of money to reduce our own emissions.
Brad Schaefer speaks for Utah's oldest and largest refiner, once Tesoro, now Marathon Petroleum.
Where our refinery is located, there's been a refining operation there since 1908.
We've been on a journey for many decades to improve air quality.
Kyle Bennett works with Rio Tinto Kennecott.
We just had our 117th birthday, the Bingham Canyon Mine.
Rio Tinto made a big change just last May.
We just closed down our coal-fired power plant, and that's going to reduce our carbon emissions by 65% annually.
And Rio Tinto is experimenting with super clean giant trucks while pursuing other clean options.
We're going to replace truck beds with lighter truck beds, which means that we can put more material in the truck and reduce the number of trips.
As of the beginning of the year, we are producing lower sulfur gasoline.
Marathon was first in Utah to commit to produce Tier 3 fuel. That makes every car in the region substantially cleaner. Some refineries have not made that change.
It could have made more sense on the bottom line of Marathon to upgrade the big refineries and let Salt Lake stay with Tier 2.
Yes.
Both companies provide good jobs.
We have about 300 jobs, permanent full-time employees at our refinery.
We have about 2,000 direct employees and roughly 9,300 indirect employees.
Still, thinking about our air, no one in 2020 would argue the Wasatch Front is a great spot for refineries or an open pit mine.
We knew then what we knew now. I can't make that decision for them, but I mean, if we, Beijing today, we would not build it where we were, right?
Lacking a time machine, how do we deal with what we have? Some things are clear. Even good corporate citizens do not make billion-dollar changes without a push.
The EPA gives refiners several different options to comply with that.
We're a highly regulated business.
And these industries do what they do with public permission. Your opinion matters.
At some point, does it just not make sense to have a big mine in a big city?
Well, I think that what we have is a unique opportunity when you have a major operation like ours that borders a major metropolitan area. What it requires is collaboration and partnership, and so that's something that we've been doing for decades.
All right, let's go back to my reporter's notebook for some perspective. Bingham Canyon is the biggest open pit mine on Earth. I looked into the biggest 10 open pit mines, and not one of them is anywhere near a big metro area like the Wasatch Front. And remember how much sulfur dioxide, or SO2, comes from Rio Tinto and the refineries? Well, our region of the country, the Southwest, has much higher levels of SO2 than any other area of the country, according to the EPA. And if you want to take personal action, go to tier3gas.org and buy gas at the stations you see there. It makes your car cleaner, and it rewards companies who produce clean gas. And we all need to pay attention so we can have a voice when public permits are up for review. It is unusual to have these industries in this kind of location with inversions and a high population. They need scrutiny. Well, still to come, the link between a shrinking lake and our air quality, and how the elevation of your home makes a difference in what you breathe.
Well, good evening. I'm meteorologist Tina Friedman with your forecast for the overnight hours and some of tomorrow. Tribune camera tonight shows it's been pretty quiet. It's a nice change in pace, but we still have an avalanche warning for our mountain locations, and that goes through tomorrow morning. So definitely backcountry is not really the greatest place to be with all that heavy snow and all those recent avalanches. Our satellite picture this evening shows we've cleared out just a little bit. We've had some broken cloud cover, and then we've got a cold front that's on the way. So it's been generally dry for about the last 6 hours or so, and things have been quiet. Temperature's pretty mild right now. It's 39 degrees in Salt Lake, 37 in Provo, 38 in Manti, and 49 in St. George. So it's turning out to be a nice evening. And then as we go through the overnight hours, we'll still have some cloud cover with mild temperatures overnight. But then we do have a chance with just some very light rain mixing with snow tomorrow afternoon, but not expecting any accumulation. We'll have another look at weather during QuickCast.
We Utahns love the mountains, while we realize they do trap in the bad air. We tend to be more indifferent about the Great Salt Lake, but it turns out that lake has protected us from some dangerous dust. And we're learning a lot about that thanks to one man and his mountain bike.
For the last 3 years or so, I've been studying dust that is emitted from the playa, or the exposed lake bed of the Great Salt Lake.
Kevin Perry's studying is not what you're picturing.
Ended up bicycling 2,300 miles over a 2-year period, and so I visited every corner of the lake bed.
And the Associate Professor of Atmospheric Sciences stopped every 500 meters and dug up soil samples.
It's about 95% sand, with only about, on average, 5% material that's small enough, silt and clay, to be eroded under certain conditions.
He had plenty of time to see those conditions. The tranquil beauty, and the turbulence.
I've personally observed dust coming off the lake in every month except for December and January.
In a 2019 paper, Perry and two colleagues showed downtown Salt Lake City on November 16, 2016, before a dust storm at 3:17 in the afternoon, then at 3:48 with dust blowing in, and at 4:20 as lake dust obscured the skyline. That dust is in millions of lungs. Perry wants to know, what's in the dust?
We identified 9 elements of potential concern. The element that we were most concerned about is arsenic.
High enough levels of arsenic can cause cancer. We might blame some of that on industry, but really?
Arsenic is naturally high in the rocks here in Utah.
It's always been blocked from us by a wall of water, but the lake is half its former size.
Most people think that the reason the lake is low is because of drought.
Not so. Perry points to this study from Utah State University, Salt Lake Community College, the Utah Divisions of Water Resources and Wildlife Resources.
We do divert water away for agricultural purposes, for municipal use, for industrial use.
We've lowered the lake level 11 feet, the study says, taking 48% of the water and uncovering 50% of the lake bed.
So it's largely our decisions that are diverting water from this lake. And the result of that is hundreds of square miles of exposed lake bed.
In 2018, the Bear River stopped flowing into the Great Salt Lake for 3 months.
It's a disaster already underway, and there's plenty of evidence where the current course leads. In 1960, the Aral Sea was the world's 4th largest lake. Diversions dried it up. Local summers got hotter and winters colder. Toxic dust ruined cropland, and Kazakhstan just built a giant dam to recreate a small portion of the old sea. In 1913, Los Angeles started diverting water from central California, drying up Owens Lake and creating America's biggest single source of dust pollution, all from about 70 square miles of lake bed. The Great Salt Lake has 10 times that much lake bed exposed right now.
We know what's going to happen if you divert too much water. And the people of Utah need to decide if they want to have a future without the Great Salt Lake, or if they want to have our namesake be preserved.
So let's get back to my notebook. The Great Salt Lake was America's 6th biggest. Only the Great Lakes were bigger, but lately it's the 8th or 9th biggest. And we are the 2nd driest state in the country, but we use water like we live next to the Great Lakes. I looked at water use in the nation's counties with more than 300,000 people. The counties of the Wasatch Front were the 1st, 4th, 13th, and 18th biggest water users per capita. That is just crazy. So a small thing we can do is set our sprinklers for less time than they were on last summer. If you want to do something big, we really should zero escape and encourage our neighbors, churches, and businesses to do the same. And as a community, talk up the lake and start to respect it. It is important in a number of ways. Now, Dr. Perry told me the state's official air quality monitors are really not located in good places to detect dust off the lake. But lots of people live in those places. That is another common thread through each of the portions of tonight's investigation. When you think of the Wasatch Front as a bowl holding that stew of air pollution, the bowl tends to fill from the bottom, most concentrated at low elevations.
Basically what happens is cold air settles in our valley and then warm air slides over the top of that, and that acts like a lid.
That lid can be high or low, trapping pollution differently. This map shows the state monitor network in the Salt Lake Valley. The official current conditions rely on these. The state uses expensive, accurate monitors.
And most importantly, they've got a dedicated staff who goes around and makes sure that all of the sensors are working correctly.
But the stations don't extend far east of the I-15 corridor. They're low in the bowl. Dr. Carrie Kelly from the University of Utah is one of the principal investigators on a project called AQ&U. They combine state, university, community, and personal monitors into a wide network.
You can have a lot more in the valley. You can get a better spatial picture of how air pollution differs, for example, here at lower and higher elevations.
Look at the AQ&U map after Friday's snowstorm. Solid green, great air. Then start the clock. By Saturday evening, the valley's bowl is filling with soupy smog. But like a soup bowl, it fills from the bottom. If you live high on the benches, your air is still green until late Sunday evening. And even through Monday afternoon, the benches breathe cleaner air. If you're thinking about moving to cleaner air, though, you have to pay. We use the AQ&U map as a guide to draw a line between yellow and green air at one point in time. We chose midnight on Sunday. We put that line on the map from UtahRealEstate.com. Houses for sale under $300,000 all fall well within the yellow airline. You really have to pay north of $400,000 and closer to $600,000 to get well into the green.
Well, we hope this special presentation has been useful to you. A personal aside, if you're feeling a little guilty, I need to improve in all these areas as well. But please keep watching and we'll keep investigating.